Some people say you never truly know someone until the day they show you who they really are. And believe me, I learned that lesson the hard way. I was coming back from a quiet vacation in Colorado. My mind was clear and my bags were still in my hand. Then a stranger opened the door to my own penthouse to tell me it was his now, the home where I lived for more than 20 years. Sold. And who had sold it? My daughter. When I called her, desperate for an explanation. Do you know what she did? She laughed. She laughed. Basically, you are homeless now, Dad, she said, as if it were nothing. But what Jennifer did not know, what she could never imagine, is that everything she did left a trail that was going to destroy her. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me go to the beginning. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me one thing. Where are you watching this story from? What time is it where you are? Leave it in the comments. And if this story is hooking you, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you do not miss the ending. Believe me, you are going to want to know how it ends. Now let us go back. 3 weeks before everything fell apart, I returned from Colorado on a Monday morning, more tired than I wanted to admit. It was 8 o'clock sharp when I checked out of the cabin. The guy at the front desk handed me the keys to the car I had left there and asked if I wanted to book for next season. I told him we would see, because at that moment the only thing I was thinking about was getting back to my house, making a cup of coffee and sitting in my favorite armchair, looking out the window of the 15th floor. Before leaving town, I stopped by the little market to buy some things for my grandkids. A knitted teddy bear that reminded me of one I had as a child, and a beaded bracelet that I imagined the little girl would love. Then I filled the tank, checked the tire pressure, adjusted the GPS, and hit the road toward the city. On the highway, I stopped at a small diner that had always given me a good vibe. I ordered a strong black coffee and a chicken sandwich. An older gentleman sitting at the next table asked me if I was coming from Arizona when he saw my license plate. We chatted for a moment, and then everyone went about their business. I switched my audiobook for one about Latin American history and turned off the air conditioning when the road started to descend, because a fresh breeze was coming in through the open window. At some point, I received a message from the book club asking when I would return to the meetings. I answered that I would be back soon, without imagining that my life was about to take a turn I did not expect. Arriving at the outskirts of the city, there was a little traffic at the highway exit. Nothing serious. When I finally entered the underground parking of the building, I was reassured that the access code was still working. The afternoon guard greeted me as always. Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson. Already back? I answered him from the car window. I just arrived today. I took the elevator up to the 15th floor. The hallway was very silent, almost spotless, as if recently cleaned. The carpet smelled like new product. I saw Mrs. Patterson from 15C watering her plants. Upon seeing me, she lifted her face in surprise. You are back already. David? I thought you were coming back tomorrow. I told her I had come back a day early because I missed my bed and the smell of my house. I walked with my suitcase rolling behind me to door 15G. Everything felt normal, until I stopped feeling it. I put the key in the lock, but it did not go in. I thought the angle was crooked, so I tried again, firmer. Nothing. I bent down, brought my face closer, and saw the metal was too shiny, too new. It was not the usual lock. I checked my keys again, counted one by one, as if I could be confusing myself at 72 years old. But no, it was the correct one. I rang the doorbell. Once. Silence. The second time. I heard light footsteps behind the door, as if someone hesitated whether to open or not. Finally, the door opened barely an inch, held by the security chain. A stranger, about 40 years old, patchy beard, looked at me with suspicion. What do you need? He asked me. It took me a second to find my words. This is my house. I just returned from a trip. He frowned. Sir, you must be confused. We bought this apartment. Before I could say anything, a woman appeared behind him, with an apron and her hair tied back. Yes, sir, she said. "We are the new owners. I asked to see documents. At least something that explained the impossible. They told me they could not show me anything and that I should talk to my daughter." My daughter. I could barely move when the man added, "The seller was Jennifer Thompson Brennan. She is your daughter, right?" I felt the entire hallway coming down on me. They continued, without realizing that every word was like a blow. They had received the house 3 weeks ago. They were very sorry, but they could not let me in because their lawyer had insisted on not allowing the former owner to enter. As I stood there, looking through the crack, I managed to see what was no longer mine. My shoe rack had disappeared. My dining table, the one I sanded and varnished myself 20 years ago, was no longer there. The painting in the hallway that I bought in Santa Fe was gone too. I heard a child laughing from inside. They lived there. For real. It was not a mistake. It was not a simple misunderstanding. My house was legally occupied by other people. I stood static for so long that Mrs. Patterson opened her door slightly and asked me if I was okay. I told her maybe there was some confusion, that I had to make some calls. I walked to the elevator with shaking hands. I went down to the lobby, went out to the garden area, and sat on the bench next to the planter. There, I finally dialed Jennifer's number. It rang 3 times. She answered, with a rushed tone. "Are you here already, Dad?" "Make it short. I am busy," I asked her point blank. "Did you sell my house?" She sighed, as if I were a nuisance. "Dad, do not exaggerate. I already solved it. Wherever you are, figure it out yourself." And she hung up. Just like that, as if she had not taken my roof, my furniture, my memories. I could not stay sitting in front of the building as if I had nowhere to go. I took my suitcase and walked to a hotel 2 blocks away. I asked for a simple room. The receptionist asked if I needed help with luggage, but I said no. I went up to the room, left the suitcase next to the bed, and sat down slowly, feeling everything inside me loosen, as if my bones had also aged all at once. I looked out the window, took a deep breath, and turned on my laptop. I had to understand what was happening, and that same night would be the start of something I never imagined living at my age. That night at the hotel, I could hardly rest. The room was silent, too silent, and yet I felt in my chest as if someone were pounding from the inside. After tossing and turning for a while, I sat in front of the laptop. I had to understand what had happened to my house, although a part of me already sensed that I was not going to like the answer. I opened my email and started scrolling down to the dates I was in Colorado. There, lost among promotions, medical appointment reminders, and library newsletters, appeared a message from a real estate agency I did not even know. The subject said, "Congratulations on your sale." I stared at the screen for several seconds, as if my eyes needed time to accept that that phrase was inside my inbox. The date of the message coincided exactly with the day I was hiking up a mountain trail, taking photos of the landscape, without knowing that at the same time someone was closing a sale on my home of 23 years. I opened the email. Inside was a PDF file attached with the sales contract. My hand trembled as I clicked. The document took a few seconds to load, and when it finally did, I saw my full name, David Angel Thompson. Below, on the last page, appeared the signature, a signature that looked like mine. But it was not mine. I recognized certain curves of the D, but there was something strange, as if the line had been drawn with the intention of looking sure, but without really knowing my most natural gestures. I zoomed in to look closely. The connections between the letters were too long. The final stroke was thicker than normal. I felt a cold chill run down my arms when I understood that that signature had been made by another person, someone who had access to samples of my writing, someone who knew my way of signing, my own daughter. I closed the PDF without being able to read on and opened the bank page. The first thing I did was look for large deposits, any movement related to the sale of the apartment. I found none. What I did find were several withdrawals I did not recognize. $1,500 here, $3,000 there, then $4,000, all made while I was away. I put my hand to my forehead. Each transaction had a confusing description: family expenses, account adjustment, medical services. None matched my usual expenses. I downloaded the account statement in PDF and saved it in a folder I named Legal Docs David. At that moment, my breathing was already heavy, as if I had climbed very steep stairs. I then searched for the digital copy of the power of attorney I had signed before my heart surgery, 2 years ago. I opened the file and read line by line. There it clearly stated that the authorization was only valid for medical decisions, in case I could not make them myself. Not a single word that allowed the sale of my property. Not one. I pressed my lips together, trying not to imagine what must have gone through Jennifer's head to take such a delicate document and use it as if it were a master key to unlock my life. I decided to call the lawyer who helped me back then, Robert Harrison. His secretary answered with a kind voice. She told me he was in a meeting and would call me back. I asked her to tell him it was urgent, that it was about a possible misuse of the POA and a sale I had not authorized. Before hanging up, I heard how my own voice sounded shaky, as if a much older man were speaking from my throat. I went back to the email to check previous messages, and among the archived emails I saw one from Jennifer, sent 5 weeks earlier. At that time I did not pay attention to it, but now I opened it carefully. It said, "Dad, remember to check your documents. I am helping to update the file." It came with an attached file. I opened it. It was another power of attorney model, one I had never seen. I closed the file slowly, as if I were afraid it would explode. How many times had Jennifer asked me for documents? Signatures? Copies to update things? How many times had I trusted her without asking questions? I searched my phone for old conversations. 2 months ago, she had written to me, "Dad, send me the scan of your signature to fill out the insurance documents." I had done it almost without thinking, believing it was an innocent task. Now I understood that there was the raw material to forge my signature. I felt a lump in my throat. It was not just the betrayal. It was the idea that everything had been planned, that every kind message hid a different intention. I opened the folder where I keep my digital documents and started organizing everything. I saved the sales contract, the emails, the account statements, the phone messages. I took notes in a new file, creating a timeline with everything I had discovered that night. I wanted to have everything clear when I talked to Robert. I was concentrated on that when I heard a soft knock on the hotel door. It was an employee bringing some complimentary water bottles. He asked if I needed anything else. I told him a printer, and he indicated there was one in the lobby. I went down with a folder in hand and printed copies of everything I thought necessary. Upon returning to the room, my cell phone rang. It was Robert. I explained what I had found: the contract email, the fake signature, the bank withdrawals, the POA model I did not remember authorizing. He listened in silence. When I finished, he said, "David, this is not a misunderstanding. Send me everything right now." I sent him the files without deleting anything. Minutes later, he wrote, "See you tomorrow." This looks like a case of POA abuse and forgery. When I thought I could finally close the laptop, calls from unknown numbers started arriving. 1, 2, I did not answer any. Then a message appeared. "Mr. David, I am from the real estate company." I deleted it. I did not want to talk to anyone who was not my lawyer, while trying to sort my ideas. An email from the bank came in. Alert. Unusual activity detected. I opened it quickly. It was a warning about several consecutive withdrawals made during my absence. I felt the ground moving beneath me. I also opened the building camera app, where I had always been able to check the entrance and the hallway. Upon entering, a message appeared. "You do not have authorization to access this device." My access had been revoked. The system indicated that the request had been made by the new owner. At that moment, I stopped moving the mouse. My hands no longer responded the same. I turned off the screen and stared out the hotel window. the illuminated street, people passing by, cars sounding far away. Everything followed its course, as if the world had no idea that my life had derailed in a single day. I moved closer to the glass, feeling the coldness of the material. I thought of my late wife, how she always told me to be careful with papers. I thought of Jennifer as a child, when she ran to me upon returning from work. I wondered at what moment we had lost that path. I said nothing. I did not cry either. I just breathed slowly and repeated to myself that the next day would be the first to start recovering what I had left. Maybe my home was no longer there, but I would keep fighting not to lose my dignity, too. That was the silent, almost shy beginning of the process to recover my house, and perhaps also to recover a part of me that I did not know could still be broken. The next morning I woke up before the phone alarm rang. It was 6:30. The hotel room was still half dark, and when I turned on the small coffee maker by the window, the smell barely filled the room. The coffee tasted watery, without strength, as if it did not want to wake me up fully. I checked my cell phone and saw 4 missed calls from Jennifer, all around 1 in the morning. I did not want to return them, not because I did not want to hear her voice, but because I still did not know how to face her without my voice breaking. I preferred to focus on reviewing the documents again, arranging the contract, the printed emails, and the account statements in separate folders. I was trying to keep my mind busy so my heart would not weigh so heavy. At 8:15 the phone rang again. It was her. I hesitated a second, but I answered. Her voice sounded tense, almost annoyed. "Dad, stop calling everyone. I already solved everything legally." I swallowed saliva and asked slowly, point blank, "Jennifer, did you really sell my penthouse?" There was a brief silence, as if she evaluated whether it was worth lying to me or not. "Dad, you are already old. You do not need such a big house." I remained mute. I did not know what to answer. I heard her breathe heavily, as if she were in a hurry to end the call. I wanted to say something else, but she had already hung up. I put the cell phone in my pocket, took a deep breath, and went down to the lobby with the folder of documents hugged against my chest, as if it were the only thing that still belonged to me. I asked the receptionist to call a taxi to take me to the lawyer's office. He looked at the papers and asked me curiously, "Going to a trial, sir?" I shook my head. "Just going to see my lawyer." I said no more. I did not have the strength to explain anything. The taxi arrived soon. The ride to Forbes Street felt strange, because we passed through areas I had traveled hundreds of times when I was still working, when life was simpler and worries did not have a proper name. The building where Robert's office was remained the same, old, with red bricks and a metal sign worn by the sun. I entered the lobby and took the elevator. The yellow bulbs flickered a bit, and the elevator went up slow, as if it also felt tired. Upon arriving at the law firm floor, the receptionist pointed me to the meeting room. It was a medium room with a scratched oak table, blue upholstered chairs, and several rows of old files on metal shelves. As soon as I put my folders on the table, Robert entered. He was holding a cup of hot tea in his hands. He greeted me with a serious gesture, without exaggerating, like someone who understands immediately that the matter is not minor. "David, sit down. Show me everything you have." I placed on the table the copies of the contract, the real estate emails, the bank screenshots. He adjusted his glasses, took the contract, and started reviewing it slowly, very slowly. "Did Jennifer tell you anything before selling?" he asked without looking up. "Not a word," I replied. He nodded, as if that answer confirmed something he already suspected. He used a marker to point out the forged signature. He brought the paper close to the lamp. "Look at the stroke. Someone tried to imitate your style, but this is shaky. This is not your signature. And also, look at the date. It matches the day you were out of state. It is impossible that you signed this." It was hard for me to look directly at the paper. I felt as if the ink itself was accusing me. Immediately, Robert took the office phone and called a company specialized in signature expertise. I heard him say, "I need Mr. Wright this afternoon if possible." Yes, an urgent case. He hung up and explained that Daniel, the expert, could come by to review the original copies and that I should keep them away from humidity and any damage. He gave me a plastic sleeve and asked me to store them there. At that moment, my cell phone vibrated again. It was Jennifer again. Robert raised his hand, indicating me to put the call on speaker. I answered. "Dad, are you trying to destroy my family?" In her tone there was a mixture of rage, nerves, and fear. I did not answer, just breathed. Robert took a notebook and started writing. Jennifer kept talking. I did it because I had no choice. "Michael's debts are huge. You do not understand." Hearing her say it with such naturalness shook me inside. It was as if she was no longer my daughter talking, but another person, someone justifying the unjustifiable. In the background, Michael's voice was heard, irritated. "Tell him to stop bothering." Jennifer repeated as if she were his spokesperson. "Michael says to leave things as they are." I closed my eyes for a second and ended the call with a simple click. I did not want to hear more. I did not want to hear how my own name was used as if I were a problem in their lives. Robert put away the notebook. "David, this confirms what I thought. Here there is POA abuse, forgery, and possible financial fraud. I tell you clearly." Then he printed me a list of the crimes that could involve an elderly person. He put it in front of me. I looked at it without reading every line, just seeing the size of the document, the thickness of the problem. When he handed me the authorization sheet for him to represent me, I signed it. My hand did not tremble because at that moment I felt more pain than fear. Robert then asked me to open other older emails. I found one from Jennifer, sent 6 months ago. "Dad, let me keep the key to the old office so I can organize your files." At that moment, I had said yes, without the thinking. Now, reading those words, I could imagine her entering my house, reviewing papers, taking things without permission. I also remembered how one day she asked me to take photos of my life insurance policy. At the time, I thought it was for some routine procedure. Now, no. Now everything had another color, another meaning. Robert noted those dates, those details. Then he asked me to call the reception of the building where I lived. I called. On the other end of the line, a young man answered. "Concierge of the Northview building. How can I help you?" I told him my name and asked about the lock change. The boy answered without hesitation. "Yes, Mr. Thompson, your daughter requested the change. She said you had gone to a care center and no longer lived here." I felt my legs weaken. Robert took notes without looking up. Before ending the meeting, Robert gave me clear instructions. Do not call Jennifer. Do not send messages. Do not answer anything. From now on, any communication goes through me. Do not face this alone. He scheduled the appointment with the expert Daniel Wright for 4 in the afternoon and accompanied me to the exit of the building when I went out to the street. The sun hit me hard in the face. It seemed brighter than other days, as if the world were exactly the same while my life was falling apart inside. I walked to the corner waiting for a taxi, feeling that every step weighed more than the previous one. I did not think about Jennifer, nor about Michael, nor the apartment, only about the afternoon meeting, about the next step. I had to stay firm, although inside I felt more fragile than ever. I returned to Robert's office that same afternoon. I arrived about 10 minutes before the agreed time because I preferred to be there, sitting in silence, rather than staying at the hotel pacing around without knowing what to do with my thoughts. The hallway smelled of old paper and reheated coffee. When I approached the meeting room, I saw someone was already inside. It was Daniel Wright, the handwriting expert Robert had told me about. He had a small aluminum briefcase, of those that seemed to belong to a lab technician. I greeted him, and he responded with a quiet courtesy. Very professional. "Mr. Thompson, we are going to review everything very carefully," he said with a sure voice that gave me a bit of calm. We sat around the table, Daniel opened his briefcase and took out a special lamp with an articulated arm, a thick magnifying glass, and a couple of tools I did not know the use for. He extended the sales contract on the surface of the table, smoothed it with both hands, and turned on the lamp, which emitted a white and cold light. He asked me to sign 3 times on a blank paper. I need recent samples, without emotional pressure, as natural as possible. He explained. I took the pen, breathed deep, and signed as I have signed all my life, with that long D and the T slightly tilted to the right. He asked me to repeat it 2 more times. He kept the signatures under a transparent sheet and started comparing them with the signature of the forged contract. I watched him move the magnifying glass. Bring it closer. Move it away. Change the angle of the light. Here is the first problem, he said, pointing to the D on the contract. The stroke does not follow the fluidity of the natural gesture. The curve is broken at 2 points. Then he showed me my own signature. Look how you press more at the beginning and soften at the end. Instead, this other one has uneven pressure. As if the hand hesitated, I felt a mixture of rage and sadness running through my chest. Daniel continued, the author of this forgery does not know the direction of your stroke. Here, for example, you usually slide the pen down diagonally, but in this document, the diagonal goes up, something that almost never happens in authentic signatures. Then he took a breath and concluded, this is forged 100%. There is no technical doubt. I remained silent for a few seconds. Hearing that phrase, although I already suspected it, hit me hard. Robert took the contract and put it next to a timeline he had drawn on a sheet. He filled it with dates. The day I traveled to Colorado. The day Jennifer asked me for the signature for a procedure. The day the building changed the lock. The day of the alleged signing of the contract. The day of the property transfer. He showed us how each event led to the next, aligned like pieces of a puzzle that did not fit by accident. None of this is casual. David, this was planned, he said with a grave tone. Daniel intervened. If the forgery is so precise, the person must have practiced several times, maybe used tracing paper, or had access to multiple samples of your signature. Hearing that, I immediately remembered when Jennifer asked me to scan my signature. I stared at my hands on the table, trying to understand at what moment I lost sight of who she really was. Robert opened his laptop and dialed a number. I am going to bring Patricia onto the case, he said. Patricia Moore was a private financial investigator who collaborated with the firm. After a brief call, Robert asked me to sign an authorization so she could track financial movements related to the sale of the apartment. I signed without hesitation, although it bothered me deeply to have to sign something else related to this disaster. 10 minutes later, a message from Patricia arrived on Robert's phone. He read it aloud. First finding. Transfer of $15,000 to Michael's name 10 days ago. They looked at each other. Daniel and Robert. As if that confirmed a shared suspicion, another message. $8,000 sent to a second account of Jennifer. Robert looked at me sideways. I just pressed my lips. Daniel continued reviewing the document under his lamp. There is something else here, he said, pointing to some small dots. These micro tremors in the stroke are typical when someone uses tracing paper to copy the original signature. He explained that the forger probably placed my real signature under a thin paper and traced it. It is not amateur work, he added. Someone did it with practice. While he spoke, Robert dialed another number to request a certified copy of the notary record that appeared in the contract. I want to see if the notary met the requirements, he said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Notaries sometimes sign without verifying identity when they receive an incentive. Robert wrote something in his notebook. I'm going to ask for the security videos of that office. We need to see who really showed up that day. Shortly after Robert's cell phone rang again, it was Patricia again. She was sending new data. Michael had accounts open on 3 betting platforms, in addition to one with a history of cash withdrawals of less than $10,000 to avoid automatic reports. She also listed 2 loans with extremely high interest in the name of private lenders. Robert wrote in his notebook again and said in a low voice he had motives, many motives. Patricia sent another email, this time addressed to both Robert and me. Upon opening it, we saw there is also an empty account recently opened in the Cayman Islands under Jennifer's name. Registered 2 weeks after the sale of the apartment. I stared at the screen as if it were not real. David, this is not simply a bad family decision. This is serious. Very serious, said Robert. Then he searched his inbox for an email from the building manager that he had requested the previous afternoon. When he opened it, I read over his shoulder. The email said, "We confirm that Mr. Thompson's daughter requested the lock change, alleging that he had entered a care center and no longer resided in the building." Robert printed the email immediately and kept it in a folder marked Primary Evidence. After that, he coordinated a meeting for the next morning between him, Patricia, and me to consolidate all the evidence. Patricia will need your permission to review Michael's accounts too. It is likely we will find more movements related to the sale. I nodded without arguing. I no longer had room for astonishment. I just wanted to move forward. When I returned to the hotel, I carried the folders against my chest as if hugging something fragile. I entered the room and spread everything on the table. I ordered the copies by date, added notes on yellow sheets, and classified everything into categories: signatures, emails, bank movements, Jennifer-Michael relationship, notary. The more I organized, the more I felt the emotional weight of each document. Each sheet seemed like a piece torn from my life. I was finishing putting away the papers when an unknown message arrived on my cell phone. "Mr. David, stop the investigation. We will be in touch." It carried no name, nor explanation. The only thing I felt was a chill behind my neck. I took a screenshot and sent it to Robert without hesitation. A few minutes later, they knocked on the door. I opened thinking it was hotel service, but it was the security guard. "Mr. Thompson, I just wanted to inform you. A few minutes ago there was a man in the lobby asking for you. When I told him I could not give him information, he left quickly. He had his face covered with a cap." I thanked him and closed. I stood still in front of the closed door, with a hand on the knob, trying to understand how my life had reached this point. That night I turned off the light without leaning to sleep. I spent a long time looking at the white ceiling of the hotel, listening to the air conditioning. The meeting the next day would be the first formal step in a real investigation, and although my hands were shaking and my head hurt, I knew there was no turning back. I lay down, but my eyes took a long time to close. For the first time in my life, I felt I was fighting not only for a house, but for the last part of me that I did not want to lose. I arrived at Robert's office at 9 o'clock sharp. At that time, the city still had a fresh air that only lasts a few minutes before the sun starts to heat the streets. I went up the old elevator of the building, feeling how the narrow walls and the smell of aged paper enveloped me again. When I entered the meeting room, Patricia was already there. She had her laptop open, a thick file held with a rubber band and a USB hanging from a blue ribbon. She greeted me with a firm handshake, and Robert closed the door behind us and locked it. "Today we need absolute privacy," he said, and that phrase tightened my chest. We sat down, and Patricia connected her laptop to the large monitor on the wall. On the screen appeared a table full of numbers and red columns. "We are going to start with the irregular transactions," she announced. She pointed to several rows. "Withdrawals of $20,500, $3,000, $4,000, all separated between 3 and 4 days. This demonstrates a pattern," she explained. Then she opened another window with a transfer of $35,200, made the same day the sale of the apartment was registered. Next to it, an extract with payments labeled as casino payout. Robert leaned forward, crossed his arms, and murmured, "This is clearly money to cover gambling debts." Patricia opened a digital folder with emails. "Now the most delicate part," she said. On the screen appeared an email that Jennifer had sent to Michael. If Dad goes away for a long time, we can take care of the apartment. Then she showed a message from Michael. Sell it. Your dad is already old. I read those words slowly, as if they burned my eyes. Dates, hours, lines. Everything coincided with the day I had made the reservation for the cabin in Colorado. I felt a pang of betrayal I did not know how to hide. Then Patricia opened a video. It was from the building's security system. I saw myself walking down the hallway 3 days before leaving on the trip, greeting Mrs. Patterson. And then, in a second video, Jennifer was seen entering my apartment with a key that was not mine. She was carrying a large bag and left 40 minutes later, with the same bag, much fuller. Patricia noted something in her notebook. Document retrieval. She also showed the email from the building manager where Jennifer asked for the lock change. I just breathed deep, with a knot between my chest and throat. Seeing those images was like reliving a silent invasion in my own house. That is not all, said Patricia. She opened another file. An email sent by Jennifer to a real estate agent 4 months ago. In the message, she asked, if I want to sell an apartment when the owner is not there, what documents do I need? The agent replied with a detailed list. Patricia had printed everything. She put it on the table and pointed to the date. 4 months before the sale. 4 months before I even planned the trip. Everything was prepared long before I suspected anything. I felt my stomach tighten again. Robert then asked me to remember anything, however small. I took a few seconds. Once she asked me where the old safe was, I said. I also remembered when Jennifer asked for my original ID card for a tax reduction procedure. Robert wrote quickly. That sounds like document gathering for impersonation. While we talked, a memory hit me. The night before my trip, I found some crumpled sheets on the study floor. I thought it was trash I myself had thrown. Now, with everything seen, I understood they could be sheets where Jennifer had practiced my signature when I told them. Patricia underlined the phrase. This reinforces the indications of premeditated forgery. Patricia stood up and drew a scheme on the whiteboard. She called it probable sequence of preparation. 4 months before, Jennifer contacts the real estate agent. 3 months before, Jennifer obtains samples of my signature. 2 months before, materials to copy signatures are bought. 5 weeks before, Jennifer enters the apartment to collect documents. 3 weeks before, she requests the lock change. 3 weeks before, signing of the forged contract. The day of the sale, large transfer. Everything was aligned so perfectly that I stared at the whiteboard thinking, since when was my own daughter capable of organizing something like this? Then Patricia opened a new PDF. It was from the building manager. Here's the application form for the lock change, she said. When I enlarged the image, I clearly read 2 boxes marked with an X. The owner no longer lives here, and the owner has been admitted to a care center. At the end, Jennifer's signature. I saw that and felt a strange pain, as if something had been ripped out of me from the inside out. Robert closed his eyes for a second, as if containing indignation. Patricia changed the screen again. This time appeared a public summary of Michael's history. Sued once for non-payment of rent, a business that had failed for 3 consecutive years. Photos of him entering a casino in Las Vegas 6 months ago. Clear financial motive, said Robert. Very clear. Robert took my POA file, the one I had signed before my operation, and opened it on the table. Let's review it together. He pointed to a specific point. Look, David, here it only allows a third party to make medical decisions on your behalf. Nothing more. Nothing to sell properties. He took a red stamp and marked a line at the bottom. Does not authorize transfer of assets. A mixture of relief and sadness invaded me. Relief knowing I had not been wrong. Sadness seeing what my daughter had become. After reviewing all the documents, Robert looked directly at me with a firm and measured tone. David, we have to proceed. First civil lawsuit to recover the property. Later, when we have more evidence, a criminal route for forgery and abuse will be opened. Patricia nodded and said she would continue tracking any offshore account or suspicious transfer linked to Jennifer. When I got up to leave, I felt my legs heavy, as if the ground were thicker. I walked towards the exit and opened the building door. A strong wind hit me in the face, lifting a bit the dry leaves from the sidewalk. I breathed deep for the first time. More than fear, I felt clarity. The truth was coming to light, and although it hurt my soul to know that my daughter had planned all this, I also knew I had to keep going, not only for the house, but for the dignity I still had left. That same afternoon, when I was trying to organize the documents on the small hotel table, my phone vibrated suddenly. It was Patricia. Her voice sounded different, more tense than usual. "David," she said point blank, "I just found something important. There is a betting account in Michael Brennan's name registered at 3 different casinos." Before I could answer, she sent me a file. I opened it and stared at the screen as if I were not understanding what I was seeing. An endless list of lost bets, exaggerated amounts, repeated charges, and at the end, a cumulative total that made me close my eyes for a second. Almost $200,000 in open debts. 200,000? I felt a weight in my chest, as if the air had become denser around me. I did not think twice. I grabbed my coat, stuffed the documents hurriedly into the briefcase, and left for Robert's office. Night had fallen a while ago, and the downtown lights flickered on the wet pavement. When I arrived at the building, there was no one left except a sleepy guard at the entrance. I went up the slow elevator and, upon the doors opening, I saw the floor was almost dark. Only a lamp lit inside Robert's office broke the gloom. Robert opened the door before I knocked. "Come in." "David," he said with a grave voice. I entered and saw Patricia connected by video call on the desk screen. I sat down without taking off my coat. I felt a strange cold, as if it did not come from outside, but from inside me. Patricia shared her screen. "This is the history of movements," she explained. In the table there were recent dates. The closest was 10 days ago. Bets on football games, blackjack, electronic roulette. In almost all appeared the same note: "Send more funds." Then she opened another tab. "This transaction's particularly relevant. It was a direct payment from Jennifer's account to the betting platform." I brought my face closer to the screen without realizing it. I did not want to believe it. But there it was. My daughter's full name, her account number, the amount. There was no way to justify something like that. Robert pointed to a spot marked with red. "Here comes the worst part. A payment of $50,000 sent to a casino called Desert Star." I looked at the date and felt my stomach shrink. It was exactly the day the sale of my apartment was registered, as if a puzzle piece fit with another. I understood that it was not an impulse, nor a temporary emergency, but something much bigger and calculated. Patricia opened a new email. "This is also important," she said. It was a message from a bank in the Cayman Islands confirming the opening of an account in Jennifer's name. The date: 10 days ago. Initial balance: $0, it said. But what really worried was that the account had been activated. "That suggests," explained Patricia, "that they expected to move a large amount there, probably the money from the sale." Robert passed a hand over his forehead and shook his head. They were preparing everything to hide the money. Robert picked up the phone and called directly. The office that had certified the signature of the sales contract. The conversation was brief and tense. I listened to only a part. "Jennifer brought it? I see. You did not verify identity? I need the documents and any available record." Then he hung up. He looked at me. "Jennifer was the one who delivered the contract, not you. And there is no video of signature verification. That is extremely serious." Before we could continue, my phone rang again. It was Mrs. Patterson. "David." "Dear," she said with her soft accent. I remembered something. The day before those new tenants arrived, I saw a small truck parked in front of the building. Your daughter was directing 2 men. They took out furniture, boxes, paintings. I thought you had moved without giving notice. I remained silent, pressing the phone against my ear. Thank you for telling me. Mrs. Patterson, I managed to murmur. I hung up and noted every word. It was one more key piece that fit perfectly with everything before. But the night still had things in store for me. Barely a few minutes passed. The phone vibrated again, this time with an unknown number. I hesitated an instant, but answered. A deep voice, serious, said Mr. David. Stop meddling where you should not. Stop the investigation. And then silence. I stared at the screen while the call ended. I did not know that voice. He did not tell me his name, but it was not necessary. Robert took my phone and wrote the number in a notebook. If it happens again, we will report it, he said calmly, although I saw a glint of worry in his eyes. Patricia continued investigating while we tried to sort the mixture of horror and rage that was accumulating. 30 minutes later, she sent another message. I found something else. It was a transfer of $8,000 from Jennifer to a man named Rico. Robert recognized him immediately. He is a private lender. Sky-high interest. It means they are paying debts in parts. I felt, for the first time, a tiredness more emotional than physical. How far had they gone? How far did they plan to go? Patricia then opened an audio file extracted from the hallway cameras. She played it. We heard Michael's voice shouting, "If we do not sell that house, we sink. There is no other option." And then Jennifer's voice, broken, saying, "My dad will never accept this." I stared at the screen without blinking. It was painful to hear that, not so much for the act itself, but for verifying that my daughter knew she was doing something that would destroy me. And still she went ahead. Robert reviewed my banking history. "Here are 3 withdrawals made from your account," he said, "each of $3,000, all authorized with your POA. I saw the reasons, family expenses, medical costs, but the transfer records showed that the money ended directly in an account associated with Michael. I breathed deep and swallowed saliva. Having the evidence in front of me hurt more than imagining it. At that moment, a new email arrived in my inbox from the bank. "Potentially fraudulent activity detected in your account." I forwarded it immediately to Patricia, who took note to include it in the general file. Robert, meanwhile, closed the folder and looked at me with a serious expression, but also of support. "David," he said, "now we have motive, method, and evidence. This is not an accident. It is not a mistake. It is a deliberate conspiracy." Patricia promised to send a full report the next day. Robert walked me to the door. I went down the elevator, feeling my thoughts resonating on the metal walls. When I crossed the lobby, a young guard greeted me with a kind smile. "Have a good night, Mr. Thompson." I nodded slowly, but my thoughts were far from there. I returned to the hotel, walking slowly. In the room, I turned on the dim lamp on the nightstand and spread all the documents on the desk. I looked at them one by one, as if they were pieces of a painting that only now I could distinguish. In the center of the chaos, the truth was drawn with clarity. Michael drowning in debts, Jennifer trying to save him at any cost, and me put as a sacrifice in a desperate plan. I sat on the bed without turning off the light. I knew I was not going to sleep, and I also knew that, from that moment, there was no turning back. I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest, as if the night had not given me rest. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and took a deep breath before starting to prepare my things. I put every folder in the briefcase carefully, like someone storing fragile pieces of his own life. Robert had repeated the same instructions several times. "Whatever happens. David, do not sign anything. Stay calm," I nodded, although in reality I did not know if I would manage to stay serene when I had my daughter in front of me. I went down to the reception and asked them to call me a taxi. The receptionist dialed the number, but the morning traffic delayed the driver almost 10 minutes. I waited in front of the door. watching how people went from one side to the other with a rhythm that contrasted with the heaviness of my body. When I finally got into the taxi, the driver, a man with a short beard and dark glasses, asked me with a kind voice, "Going to visit family, sir?" I did not know what to answer without feeling a lump in my throat, so I simply nodded. He smiled in the rearview mirror without knowing that that word, family, hurt me today more than ever. The ride was silent. Arriving at West El Monte Drive, I saw the row of small and well-kept houses, painted in warm tones. Jennifer's was in the middle of the block. Michael's car was there, tilted slightly to one side, with a visible dent in the door and the rear glass scratched. The front yard was neglected, with plastic toys thrown among the grass. From the half-open door, the sound of a children's program on television could be heard. I stayed a few seconds in the front, breathing, holding the briefcase as if it were a shield. Then I knocked on the door. Jennifer appeared almost immediately. She had red eyes, with deep circles and hair tied back carelessly. When she saw me, she opened her eyes a little more, surprised. "Dad," she murmured. Then, with a tired gesture, she opened the door wide. "Come in. But please, let's not make a scene." I entered without saying anything. The house was a mess. Children's clothes thrown on the armchair, dirty plate on the dining table, small shoes at the foot of the stairs. I also noticed the smell of old coffee mixed with something like alcohol. Michael was sitting at the kitchen bar, leaning forward, drinking from a mug without even looking at me. "Dad," started Jennifer with a weak voice, "please do not take this further. We have our reasons." I left the briefcase on the table. I did not sit down. I could not. I felt that if I did, my legs might tremble. I opened the briefcase and took out the copy of the sales contract. I put it in front of her. Michael looked away for just a second and let out a snort. "You have another house, right? It is not like you end up on the street," he said with a tone that froze me. I did not answer. I pointed to the fake signature with my finger. Jennifer swallowed saliva. Her hands trembled slightly. "Dad, I just did what I had to do." I heard that phrase as if it did not come from her, but from someone I did not recognize. Suddenly, two small voices burst in. My two grandkids ran out from their room, each with a toy in hand. The youngest girl stopped in front of me and looked at me with round eyes. "Why is Grandpa sad?" she asked. I felt a prick directly to the heart. Jennifer hurried to get up. "Go to the room. My loves, I am coming." She took them inside and closed the door softly. When she returned, her expression had changed. She was more tense, as if holding back tears cost her energy. I took advantage of that moment. "Tell me the truth." "Jennifer," I said slowly, "why did you sell my house without telling me a word?" Before she could answer, Michael intervened with a pasty voice. "The debts belong to everyone. Old man, family supports each other. You should understand." The smell of alcohol came out so clear from his mouth that I confirmed he had been drinking since morning. I took out the folder with the documents Patricia had given me. I put it in front of both. The list of Michael's debts, the suspicious transfers, the offshore account. Jennifer looked at the numbers and then turned to Michael with desperation. "You said it was less. You said we only needed a part." Michael pressed his lips, without stopping looking at me with certain annoyance, as if I were the problem. Jennifer buried her face in her hands. "Dad, I thought if we sold the house we could get up to date. I thought with just one sale it was enough. I did not want to hurt you." Her voice trembled, and although her words seemed sincere, a part of me knew she had crossed a line from which there is no return. Michael hit the table with his open palm, making the mug vibrate. "If you hadn't disappeared on a trip, we wouldn't be like this. We had to act fast." For an instant, everything remained in silence. I only heard my own breathing, slow and heavy. I did not raise my voice. I only said, "Tomorrow I will file the lawsuit. I cannot allow this to continue." Jennifer threw herself at me, grabbing my arm as if clinging to a rope before falling. "Dad, please, please do not do it." It was not my intention to go so far. Her tears fell on my sleeve. But before I could say anything, Michael interrupted. Leave him be. Jennifer, he was never on our side. I felt a deep tiredness, as if every word he said added years to me. I headed for the door without looking back. When I went outside, I saw Mr. Baker, the next door neighbor, standing on the sidewalk with his phone pointing discreetly toward the house. I recorded a bit. He told me in a low voice, just in case you need proof that something weird is happening in there. I nodded gratefully. Although I could barely find words, I walked away a few steps, breathing the fresh morning air, which contrasted with the dense knot I carried inside. I took out my phone and dialed Robert's number. When he answered, I only said one sentence, with a thread of a voice. Tomorrow we start everything. And I hung up. I walked slowly down the sidewalk, feeling how every step took me a little further away from a house that was no longer home, and from a daughter who I no longer knew if she still belonged to me. We arrived at the county courthouse at 8:30 in the morning. The air was still cold, and the sky had that grayish tone that precedes a complicated day. Robert walked beside me with a firm step, carrying a huge folder under his arm. I, instead, carried the briefcase tight against my chest, as if somehow it could protect me from what was to come. We entered the building parking lot, but it was so full that it took us almost 10 minutes to find a free space. That small delay gave me time to breathe deep, to repeat to myself that I could not wobble now. Inside the courthouse, the line for civil procedures snaked down the hallway. There were people with folders, others with boxes full of documents, some arguing with their lawyers. I stood, feeling my legs weigh more than normal. Robert indicated me to take a seat on a wooden bench. Just sign where I indicate, he said while reviewing the papers. He passed me a thick bundle. The civil lawsuit, the request for asset freezing, the petition to suspend any transaction related to the Penthouse. I signed slowly, one by one, feeling that every stroke of my name was like driving a thorn deeper. Once the procedure was completed, the court clerk stamped the documents with a noisy seal that resonated in the room. That sound, dry and forceful, made me shudder. It was like a hammer blow splitting my life in two. Robert put everything away and told me, now we wait for the emergency hearing. We sat again on the bench. I rested my hands on my knees so the tremor would not show. Not much time passed before Luis appeared, a court employee Robert knew. He approached with a tired smile. Another case of misused POA. Robert? He asked. Robert just nodded, and Luis looked at me with a mix of compassion and surprise. I looked away. I did not want anyone to see me as a victim. A few minutes later, the door at the end of the hallway opened, and Patricia entered hurriedly carrying her laptop and a USB hanging from her neck. Her cheeks were red from the cold or from the rush. I have additional material, she said, almost out of breath. She opened her laptop right there and showed me 3 new elements. A video where Jennifer directed 2 men taking boxes out of my apartment, Michael's updated debt statements, and the email where Jennifer requested the lock change. This will be a direct hit, she affirmed. I nodded, although inside me something tore more every time I saw evidence confirming the unthinkable. My own daughter had been an active part of destroying me. Finally, we were called to the room. We entered and took seats, at the moment. Judge Harrison entered, tapped the gavel lightly, and asked everyone to sit. Then I saw them enter, Jennifer and Michael. They walked fast, almost pushing each other. When their eyes crossed with mine, both stopped for a second. Jennifer was pale, wearing a wrinkled white shirt, her hair tied back carelessly. Michael avoided looking at me, with his jaw clenched and hands in his pockets. The hearing began almost immediately. Robert stood up and exposed everything with a clarity that impressed me. My trip with lodging receipts, the contract with the forged signature, the suspicious transactions, the POA limited only to medical decisions. While he spoke, the judge took notes and nodded slightly. I felt my heart beating in my temples. Then they called Daniel, the handwriting expert. They projected on the screen two huge images, my original signature and the fake signature on the contract. Daniel explained every stroke, every difference in pen pressure, every poorly made curve. Here it is clearly noted that the hand signing is not the same. It is a complete forgery. I felt my face burn. Jennifer lowered her head and squeezed the edge of her shirt between her fingers. When the judge opened the turn to respond, Michael stood up abruptly, as if he needed to defend himself at any price. Your Honor, I did not know the signature was fake. I thought my father-in-law had signed it. Robert responded, without altering his voice. Allow me to present this email, dated 2 weeks before the sale. On the screen appeared a message from Michael to Jennifer. Do it fast. My dad does not notice anything. Michael sank into his seat. Mute. Patricia took the floor next. She showed the list of loans, Michael's bets, and the video where he shouted at Jennifer in the hallway. The judge adjusted his glasses. What do you have to say about this? He asked. Jennifer stood up without looking at anyone. Her voice trembled. I just wanted to save my family. I did not know what else to do. And then she broke completely. Dad, please, do not do this. I will return everything to you, I swear. Her tears resonated throughout the room, and for a second, my oldest instinct, that of a father, wanted to run to help her. But reality held me firm like a wall. Robert took a step forward. Your Honor, this case is no longer a domestic matter. It is about fraud, forgery, and financial abuse against an elderly adult. The judge did not take long to dictate his preliminary decision. His voice was firm, almost cold. He ordered the immediate freezing of all accounts belonging to Jennifer Thompson Brennan and Michael Brennan. Any transaction related to the Penthouse is suspended. The file is remitted to the prosecutor's office for criminal evaluation. I felt someone squeezing my stomach from the inside. I did not know if it was relief, sadness, or both mixed. Jennifer fell into her chair, hiding her face. Michael clenched his fists, and his neck turned red with rage. When we left the room, I saw something that froze me. A dark-skinned man, with a hood, approached Michael. He spoke in a low voice, but enough for us to hear. Do you have the money? My men are waiting. Michael stepped back, almost tripping. Robert and I looked at each other, knowing exactly what that meant. Outside the building, Patricia breathed deep. The sun fell on the stairs, illuminating the asphalt as if the day wanted to erase everything that had happened inside those walls. Robert rested a hand on my shoulder. First step 1. David. I held the briefcase tightly. People walked, talked, laughed around us, oblivious to the storm I carried inside. I stood in front of the court, observing the huge glass doors, and for the first time since it all started, I felt the tide beginning to turn, although the price was higher than I would have ever imagined. That morning I woke up before the alarm clock, with that strange feeling when one knows a decisive day is approaching. I put on a light blue shirt I had ironed the night before, a gray tie I kept for years and almost never used. I put every document inside the leather briefcase, checking it twice, making sure not to forget anything. My hands trembled a little, not from fear, but from a rare mixture of exhaustion and wounded dignity. I felt I had to present myself clean, whole, even if inside I was crumbling. At 8, Robert arrived to pick me up at the hotel. He did not want me to take a taxi. Today there will be journalists outside the court. Better to avoid problems, he said while opening his car door. I nodded without a word. Everything in me was focused on what would come next. During the ride, we hardly spoke. Only the noise of traffic filled the car. Patricia waited for us directly at the court. She had left earlier to print the last certifications of the financial investigation. The court was more crowded than usual. In the hallways, 2 journalists were taking photos of another family involved in a different problem, but one of them recognized Robert and asked, another case of power of attorney abuse. Mr. Harrison? Robert quickened his pace without answering, and I followed him. feeling my chest tighten. I did not want my pain to be a topic of conversation for anyone. Approaching the room, I saw Jennifer and Michael sitting on a bench. Jennifer had red eyes, maybe from crying, with her hair tied back any which way. Michael, instead, seemed nervous, looking around every few seconds. Between the two was a young lawyer, dressed impeccably but with a tense face. Probably they had hired him in a rush, looking for a last-minute defense. When Jennifer saw me, her body gave a slight start. Michael looked up just an instant and then looked away. We entered the room. It was wide, with the state seal hanging on the wall and well-polished wooden benches. To the left sat Robert, Patricia and I. To the right, Jennifer, Michael and their lawyer, whose name, according to the clerk, announced, was Davis, the judge. A man with a firm gaze, entered minutes later. The hearing began with Robert presenting everything we had collected. Daniel's report on the forged signature, the emails between Jennifer and Michael, the transaction records Patricia had analyzed, the building camera video showing my daughter taking boxes out of my home. Every time an image or document was projected, my chest became heavier. Hearing my name in others' mouths, used as evidence, tore me apart. I never imagined seeing myself involved in something like this. Davis, Jennifer and Michael's lawyer, tried to respond. My clients acted under a family misunderstanding, he said with a measured voice. Robert did not take long to reply by showing him the email where Jennifer contacted a real estate agent 4 months ago, asking what papers she needed to sell a property without the owner's presence. Davis blinked, surprised, and stayed silent for a couple of seconds. That silence said more than any argument. Then they called Daniel Wright. He explained patiently how he had compared the signatures, the irregular curvature, the uneven pressure, the inverted direction of some strokes. On the screen, the enlarged details were shown. Jennifer, seeing the evidence so clear, covered her face. I just looked down and breathed deep. Seeing her shame was another blow, but I could do nothing. Patricia took the turn after. Her tone was professional, almost surgical. She showed the list of Michael's debts, the total of $200,000. She explained how the money from the sale had been transferred almost the same day to the Desert Star Casino. Then she projected the video where Michael shouted at Jennifer in the hallway, "If we do not sell, we lose everything." That moment resonated in the room, and a murmur ran through those present. Michael sank into his seat, unable to deny the evident. Patricia did not finish there. She called to the stand a second witness, Mr. Baker, my neighbor. He entered with calm steps, an older man with thick glasses. He declared he had heard constant arguments, and that he saw a truck taking out my furniture while I was away. It seemed strange to me, he said, but I thought maybe they were moving together as a family. Jennifer did not look up a single time during that testimony. It was then that Jennifer stood up. Her hands trembled. Her voice was very low at first. I thought my dad no longer needed that house. I wanted to help my family. I did not know what else to do. I looked at her, but said nothing. Robert, however, presented the document confirming the bank opening in the Cayman Islands in her name. The judge observed it over his glasses. Helping the family with an offshore account? He asked with a hard irony. Michael, perhaps feeling pressured by everything coming to light, stood up abruptly. It was I who insisted on selling. Jennifer did it for me. His lawyer tried to make him sit, pulling his jacket, but it was already late. His words floated in the air like an involuntary confession. At that moment, I saw something that shuddered me. At the back of the room, standing next to the door, was the man in the hooded coat, the same one who had faced Michael in court the previous day. Michael saw him, and his face paled. He murmured something between his teeth. "I do not have the money. Give me more time." I did not hear an answer, but the man's presence was enough to understand the danger they were in. The argument phase ended. The judge took a few minutes to review documents. Then he spoke with a voice that filled the whole room, with the evidence presented. This case merits immediate transfer to criminal investigation. Jennifer burst into tears, a heartbreaking cry. Michael rubbed his face with desperation. I stood still, without reacting. I only heard the echo of the judge's words rumbling in my head. The judge decreed a recess of 20 minutes. We went out to the hallway. A guard who had witnessed everything approached me. He put a hand on my shoulder and murmured, "You are doing the right thing, sir. Many older adults go through this and do not dare to report." I nodded slowly. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired, very tired, when they called the parties to resume the hearing. I walked toward the room door with the briefcase tight in my hand. I knew the final decision was close, and although this whole process was breaking my heart, something inside me understood that justice was finally beginning to make its way. When we returned to the room after the recess, I felt as if the air had become thicker. The judge entered with a thick file in his hand, one that carried several red stamps on the cover. We all stood up. I did not even hear the "you may be seated." The beats in my ears were louder than the judge's voice. I knew something definitive was coming. The judge opened the file and began to read slowly, with a seriousness that made me tighten my fingers on the edge of the bench. "The court has reviewed the evidence presented." He continued with a list that seemed endless. Signature forgery, power of attorney abuse, fraudulent transactions, financial exploitation of an elderly adult. Every time he said a word, I saw Jennifer's face shrink a little more. She lowered her head, breathed fast, as if every accusation were a direct blow to the chest. Michael, instead, looked at the floor as if he wanted to disappear. When the judge finished reading, Michael stood up abruptly. "Your Honor, I was under a lot of pressure. I did not mean to do harm. I did not think it would go so far." The judge, cutting his words like someone cutting a rope. "Pressure is no excuse to commit a crime. You made conscious decisions." Michael sank back into the seat. I saw how he swallowed saliva, nervous, looking toward the door in case the hoodie man appeared again. Suddenly, a woman in a gray suit entered through the side door. She walked to the stand with firm steps. "I am Prosecutor Torres, from the County Prosecutor's Office. We come to notify that this case will be officially investigated as a criminal offense." The murmur in the room was immediate. Jennifer turned to Michael and whispered desperately, "Say something. Tell them it was not my fault." But Michael did not look at her. He just passed his hand over his forehead, sweating. The judge continued, "Due to the severity of the case, the freezing order is extended." The judicial secretary took a stamp and marked several documents while the judge read. "All accounts in the name of Jennifer Thompson Brennan and Michael Brennan are frozen. The account in the Cayman Islands associated with the number is frozen. Rights of disposal of joint assets are suspended." Robert leaned toward me and whispered, "This is huge. David, we are gaining ground." But I felt no victory. My heart was divided between the need for justice and the pain of seeing my own daughter collapse in public. And then the unexpected happened. The hoodie man appeared again. He was standing in the corridor, just outside the room, staring at Michael. He said nothing, just lifted his chin slightly, like a silent reminder. Michael paled. He seemed about to vomit. The guards noticed the tension and approached. One said seriously, "Sir, you cannot be here. You have to leave." The man murmured something like, "I want my money this week," and then he left without looking back. The judge asked for order in the room. Jennifer got on her knees in front of me, something I never imagined seeing in my life. Her trembling hands grabbed my pants. "Dad, Dad, please. I did not know what to do. Forgive me. Do not leave me alone." Her voice sounded broken, and seeing her like that tore me apart. But before I could react, her lawyer Davis took her by the shoulders and lifted her. "Do not say another word. Everything can be used against you." I stood still. I felt the pain of a father more than any sentence in this room. The door opened and a daycare teacher entered carrying a child's backpack. 2 children went behind her. "Excuse me." No one came for the children. I brought them directly from school. My two grandkids ran toward Jennifer, hugging her around the waist. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Jennifer hugged them tightly. But Michael stepped away toward the wall, unable to face the gaze of his own children. I felt a knot in my throat that tightened more than I could bear. The judge asked everyone to return to their places. Then he pronounced the temporary resolution. The condo in dispute remains protected under litigation status. Neither party may use it. Mr. David Thompson will have the right to access the property accompanied by building personnel to perform an inventory of what remains. I nodded slowly. It was not the complete victory yet, but it was an important step. The hearing ended. Upon leaving, we saw several journalists trying to approach. Robert took my arm and said, "This way. David, let's go out the back door." Patricia walked behind, checking something on her phone. "I will send you the full summary of criminal evidence this afternoon," she commented without stopping looking at the screen. While we went down the exterior stairs of the court, a dry leaf fell right in front of me. I stopped an instant. That small detail, so simple, so insignificant, took me back to when Jennifer was a child, and we walked together down that same hallway of the Civic Center to see an art exhibition. She was 7 or 8 years old. She smiled without worries, held my hand. I picked up the leaf from the ground and kept it in my pocket. I did not know why I did it. Maybe to remind myself that there was a time when everything was different. Suddenly, an officer approached Michael. "Mr. Brennan, I need you to come with me. We have questions about your debts and an immediate verification order." Michael murmured a curse and followed the officer with his head down. Jennifer stayed sitting on the court steps, crying and hugging her two children. I stayed looking at her a few seconds. My feet wanted to advance, console her, but my mind knew that any word of mine could complicate everything. And, beyond that, I knew that if at that moment I let myself be carried away by compassion, all the justice I was trying to recover would crumble. Robert turned to me. "David, you did the right thing, even if it hurts." I looked at the courthouse building, imposing, cold, full of echoes and decisions that change lives, and I understood, with a bitter clarity, that sometimes justice and family affection cannot be on the same side. That day, for the first time, I knew that justice was beginning to open its way, but the price was my own broken heart. You know, after everything I lived, I understood one thing that I wish no one had to learn like this. Betrayal does not always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the blood one loves most. But I also learned that one cannot stay silent, even if it hurts. That justice is not revenge. That setting limits does not mean stopping loving. And that protecting oneself is also an act of self-love. Today, if there is something I want to leave with you, who are listening to my story, it is this: do not ignore the signs. Do not give your trust without care. And never, never allow someone, even if it is your own family, to walk over your dignity. And now I want to ask you something heart to heart. If you were in my place, if your own son or daughter betrayed you that way, what would you do? Would you fight? Would you forgive? Would you seek justice like I did? I would like to hear from you. For real. Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Because every story has many perspectives, and yours matters too. Thanks for joining me this far. May God bless you, wherever you are, and may you never lack strength to defend what is yours.